Most real estate investors think that short-term rentals or long-term rentals are the only ways you can make money in this. But what if I told you there's a third option that might be the best of both worlds? Lower turnover, fewer headaches, and some seriously strong profits. Today we're diving into a strategy that is helping investors dodge Airbnb regulations, simplify operations, and unlock a whole new level of cash flow. We're talking midterm rentals today, and we've got one of the top experts in the field to help you out. Let's get into it. Running short-term rentals is constant work. Guest in, guest out, and you're still expected to be your own bookkeeper? I had multiple listings going and no real way to manage the money that was coming in. Between flipping beds and trying to match receipts from a payment a month ago, I couldn't even know if I was making real money. That's when I found Baselane. It's the official banking platform of BIGGERPOCKETS, and it handles all of the tracking and reporting I used to do manually. Now I can see real-time financial reports for each listing and know if there's a problem that's arising. For example, last month I had a 300% spike in my electric at one of my properties, and I realized that I needed to do something. I quickly set up a smart thermostat inside of it, and my electricity bill was cut almost in half. Thanks to things like Baselane, I avoided losing my profits and actually getting them back in my pocket. Start protecting your profits today by signing up at baselane.com/BP, and you'll get your $100 bonus right when you sign up. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Bigger Stays. My name is Garrett Brown. I'm the resident BIGGERPOCKETS STR expert. And today we have another expert on the field, Ziana McIntyre from Colorado. Happy to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Yep, and we're going to talk about midterm rentals specifically today, and I think that there's a big correlation between short-term rentals and midterm rentals. For a lot of people out there, they've probably been a little curious about maybe that might be something that fits their lifestyle more, or maybe the location they're exactly in. So I wanted to bring on an expert that actually could talk more about it and how exactly this process could lead into the wealth and financial freedom that you're actually looking for when you're working in real estate. So what exactly first drew you to midterm rentals? It's kind of a newer term, but they've been around for a long time. So what made you confident that you could, turn these into something you wanted to?
Yeah, well, I got into them out of necessity. So it was during COVID when, I don't know if you remember if you were doing short-term rentals back then, but mine just dried up. It was kind of like March, and then everything that I had booked all the way till May just got canceled. And I was kind of freaking out. I was like, well, I have a lot of these. I've got to get them booked somehow. So I had remembered a friend of mine in Maui, where I grew up. She had been doing nurse rentals forever because her husband and her had been nurses and they worked at the hospital and they really had an inn. So I was kind of like, I wonder if I could do that in St. Louis, like where I had all these places. And it worked out really well. It ended up being that at that time, there were a lot of emergency people coming in. So I had policemen and firemen, and then also people coming back and quarantining, people needing a bigger house because they were now schooling from home. So I got a taste of it and then realized like, wow, this is actually kind of easier. So I've stuck with it.
One thing that I like to hear from your story is that you had short-term rentals and you pivoted to the midterm rental model, because I think a lot of people get scared that, my short-term rental, it couldn't be we don't have a midterm rental market and all these things. You say you did it by necessity, but did you have any data or research that you knew it was going to be successful, or did you just kind of fly by the seat of your pants and hope it worked out in that moment?
Definitely the latter, Garrett. I feel like you don't know me enough yet. I'm a fly by the seat of her pants girl. I was like, okay, how am I going to do tours? Because I'm thousands of miles away. I just was going to figure it out. I'm not the type who's like, well, I guess my properties will sit empty for 4 months. I was like, no. We're going to get these rented. Hell or high water, we're doing this.
Now you're a doer.
I'm a doer. And luckily I might have had 4 in St. Louis at that time. St. Louis is actually a great market for nurses because there's a lot of hospitals there. And yeah, I was fortunate that a lot of the places that I have midterm rentals and short-term rentals, they could work as both because they were more urban markets than just strictly short-term rental vacation markets, which would be harder.
We'll dive into how you've grown and now maybe analyze markets a little more, but tell us about the first MTR that you had, or the first few that you converted. What were the big changes that you saw between a short-term rental? And you mentioned how did you solve some of those problems, tours and things like that? Where were some of the first steps you started taking?
Yeah, well, I was lucky to find is that people often are still just booking online. So now if you're dealing with the nurses, a lot of times they're not in the area yet. And so they're just searching through the photos, same as any other short-term rental guest would. And they're sort of, taking a leap of faith, trusting you. There is more involved with the midterm rental because you've got to do some tenant vetting. It depends how much you want to do, but I've gotten pretty strict about it. Back when it was just nurses, like kind of from COVID to maybe 2022, 2023, it was a lot of nurses that I was hosting. And I felt really comfortable with them because they had a background check from their job and you kind of knew what they were coming to do. But if you're getting just random people from the internet, you definitely want to do a lot more vetting. And so this can look like tenant screening, which nowadays, everything is really easy online. You can go on Zillow, they'll do it all for you. But it is a little more paperwork than if you were doing just a short-term rental. So it's important to know that.
Do you still have short-term rentals in your portfolio that you're operating?
Yeah, I have ones that they lend more to short-term rental, even though I prefer the midterm model, and I'll always try for that first. Sometimes it's just like, hey, it's summertime. We can make way more money if we rent for 2 days at a time. Let's do that. And so my favorite are the markets where it's still legal to short-term and you can fill in all your gaps that way. So kind of doing a hybrid.
That probably is obviously a massive benefit to short-term rental hosts, but are there any other big benefits to adding a couple MTRs into your portfolio or kind of, getting a little diversity in your portfolio going forward that you've kind of seen?
Yeah, I would say it just gives you a lot more space and time because a lot of these guests are coming in 6 weeks, 3 months. And so they might have a couple questions for you that first week when they show up. And then after that, it's just crickets. And so it's really nice to kind of set it and forget it. And then a lot of these guests were extending. So with travel nurses, they'll do a 3-month contract and then often they'll get one more as an extension. And if they're happy with you, they'll just stay. So that can be really easy to be like, wow, okay, this place is booked for 6 months. I really don't have to think about it. And I know people might be going, well, why don't I just do long term? Well, you make way more money. If you were wondering, that's why.
I love that answer because that's exactly the reason I tell people to when I'm teaching about short-term rentals, I tell people, especially when you're getting to more urban markets and things, you never know where regulations are going to go in a market. You never know what, zoning, all these things that you really don't have control of as a short-term rental host. Hopefully the city that you're moving into has already had some kind of regulation happen, but
yeah, or you get grandfathered in. That's happened to me at some places. So good.
For sure. But I think it's a great way to analyze a deal to know if hey, if this didn't work out as a short-term rental, could I operate as a midterm rental? Could I operate as a long-term rental? So that way you have some backup plans. How do you go into a deal and analyze a midterm rental? People wouldn't understand short-term rental side takes a few steps, and I don't want to simplify it too much, but what are some of the quick things that you're looking at when you're looking at a midterm rental to see if it could be a good option for them?
Yeah, the first thing I look at is Furnish Finder. So if people are not used to that, that's a website where a lot of people are looking for furnished rentals. So that's a really good one to be on if you're going to do midterm rentals. And so you can go in there and you can search what's around me. And sometimes it's all over the place where, people are charging way too little or way too much and it's hard to fully gauge. But you can get a little bit of an idea based on, okay, these people have a certain level of furnishings that I'm going to have, and you can get a good gauge of price there. You can generally earn more money on Airbnb, but I like to go with a conservative estimate, so I go with Furnish Finder first.
Are there features that you're looking for in a place when you're analyzing a deal? What are your top 3? If you're looking at a market and a deal specifically that you're thinking about, what are 3 things that you see and you get really excited about in the midterm rental space that makes you, really want to close that deal?
Yeah, I think it just comes down to why are people going to be coming to your place? And before, a lot of people were really looking at hospitals, and now it's been just a little bit less traffic with travel nurses. So you want to kind of keep an eye on that. But there are levels of hospitals. So a level 1 trauma center, which you can just kind of look up if you're saying hey, I want to look at Cleveland, for example, what are the good level 1 hospitals? That'll just pop up for you on a search. And from there, those level 1 trauma centers will tend to have the most travel nurses. So if you can park yourself between 1 or 2 of those, that can be really helpful. Also, universities are great. I live in Boulder, Colorado. This is a huge university town. we have a population of 100,000 and we have 40,000 students. So I get a lot of traveling professors. I get students that are from other countries and they're coming just for one quarter or something like that, internships. So a university can be a big draw, but you want to know, is this university 10,000 students or are we talking about 40,000 students? So you have to do a little bit of research for yourself first.
I have a friend that, he does a few different things in the real estate world, and he's been doing like some insurance relocation things a lot more and like kind of talking about that. Is that something you've explored at all, or like, reaching out to corporations or things like that to try to draw in, people that come in to stay with you in particular places?
It's actually harder than it sounds. Like there are people that do this and they do it really well. And so if you're fortunate, you can actually get hooked up with someone who does tenant placement. So there's kind of all these avenues now that have opened up of little side jobs in these like short and midterm rental spaces. It used to just be cleaning companies and management companies, but now there's this kind of hybrid of tenant placement services. So it's the people that have gone out and said, I'm going to cold call all the hospitals. I'm going to find all the recruiters. I'm going to make all these government connections. And then I'm just basically going to sell those leads. So if I can place someone at your property, you're going to give me a placement fee or you're going to give me a percentage of every month. And so there are certain markets where there are great people like that. And if you can get connected to one, then you don't have to do all the work yourself. Yes, you're splitting profits, but it's great if you get a $7,000 a month booking. Like, why not?
So yeah, it's the principle of, do you want, 50% of a watermelon or 100% of a grape, where it's like, I would rather be having and it also sounds like if they're doing a little bit of the heart. I personally don't like reaching out to people for things and cold calling and all that. So if I can get somebody to bring in those leads, that sounds like a win-win on both sides. What are the key differences in furnishing a midterm rental versus short-term rental? Because I think that's another thing that kind of, confuses people. They're thinking bigger things instead of, like functional things. So what are some of the differences you see there typically?
Yeah, I think the kitchen needs to be more built out. So sometimes people sort of forget that with a short-term rental. They're like, they're going to eat out. It doesn't matter. And it's like, well, these people are there a longer time. And so they do want to have maybe measuring spoons, maybe a blender. There's certain things that you'd want to have, good pots and pans that people sometimes forget. And then I'd say it doesn't need to be as flashy. So now in the short-term rental space, you're really seeing these like crazy themed out homes with neon walls and all these, murals. Like there's just like a lot that you could do.
The amenities arms race is what I call it.
It really is. And so they don't necessarily need a hot tub. They don't necessarily need, a plant wall. Like they don't care as much. So you can dial that back, but it is still nice to have something with beautiful photos and just beautiful design that looks comfortable, have a good couch, things like that. I want to plug a friend of mine who he came up with a model in the midterm rental space that I think is genius. So he does something called the crew model that he just kind of came up with himself, but he buys places in like C neighborhoods. So maybe not the roughest part of town, but like a little bit rough. He goes in and he renovates these multi-unit buildings and then he furnishes them the super basic. So TV in all the rooms, comfortable bed, but nothing fancy. And he's able to be the cheapest one on the market. And I think the problem is that everyone is competing for the top spot. So like you're saying, this like amenities arm race, everybody wants to be the number one. But what if you could afford to be the cheapest one? Wouldn't everyone want to book you? And so he's just killing it in markets like Buffalo because he's got all of the construction companies and they come back again and again. So if you can get that blue collar market, it's actually really profitable. So just got to think a little bit different than everybody else.
You actually helped write the book on midterm rentals for Bigger Pockets along with Sarah Weaver. It's called 30 Day Stays. And if anybody hasn't purchased it or like looked into it, we'll leave a link in the description. Highly recommended. They go into so much detail about the differences between midterm rentals and everything else out there. But you also talk a little bit about expenses and the changes there. Like what are some of the expenses that go along with a midterm rental compared to short-term short-term rental? Because my expenses are through the roof every month with short-term rentals, and I'm hoping it's not the same for midterm rentals maybe.
It's a lot less, which is nice. I mean, obviously you still have to cover utilities, but I find that people are gone a lot, especially nurses. So somehow the utilities tend to be a little bit more reasonable. Maybe also because people are living there. So maybe they're not like, I'm going to leave the AC on all day while I'm gone. And then you're not having as many turnovers, so you don't have as many cleaning costs. And then people are also buying more of their own supplies. So they'll replenish the toilet paper. You kind of get them started, but they'll buy their own shampoo and conditioner, and they usually leave a lot of stuff that you can, again, use for the next turn. So that can help too.
Have you had any nightmare guests or anything like, like that's probably another thing that people kind of get worried about, like what were some red flags maybe that you saw or in hindsight saw that maybe you can, tell the viewers that they can kind of look out as they're screening tenants and things like that, because it's a little different than the short-term rental side.
I've been an investor since 2012, and I'm just starting to see maybe in this last year that there are a lot more evictions happening. I kind of went through like 10 years, no evictions. I'm like, this is great. Why does anybody worry about rental properties? And then I had kind of a slew of them all at once. And so I'm not sure if there's just more fraud going on, if there's more people that are just struggling to find work or what's going on. But we definitely had someone who applied in Colorado Springs that was military supposedly. But then when we kind of dug in deeper and he stopped responding and wasn't paying rent, and then we couldn't quite find, which branch and anybody to follow up with. So I think there are people that will try to fraud you a little bit. So you need to be pretty diligent. And one thing that's helped me a lot is the BIGGERPOCKETS book on rental properties that Grace and Amelia wrote. I don't know exactly the name, so maybe you guys can put it in the comments. But I did read it, and they are so thorough. So I basically gave it to my two assistants and said, do this. So that has helped us a lot.
That makes a lot of sense. And kind of goes into my next question is one of the benefits you talk about in the book of midterm rentals is you can self-manage from almost anywhere, and you kind of, embody that. How does that look in practice? Like, what does your team structure look like, or, like your core four in that area maybe, or like how have you kind of set that up for success for you?
I would say do as I say, not as I do. I own in 4 states, and I just kind of I saw the whole growth of short-term rentals. So I was sort of seeing, oh, this market sounds hot, or this one's interesting, or maybe this is going to be like the next big thing. So I definitely own in a lot of places and haven't sold them. So every time you're in a new market, you kind of have to reinvent the wheel. And I don't always recommend that. It's so much easier when you've got 5 places all within a couple miles. You can use the same cleaner and the same handyman. That is the team, really, is your cleaner and handyman. And for me, because I do other stuff, I'm a realtor, I don't necessarily want to be in the weeds of the management. And so instead of paying somebody 20 or 25%, I just got an assistant. And so you can get an offshore assistant that might be $5 or $10 an hour, and you do 10 hours a week, and maybe they do some other things for you. So yeah, I think that's the best way to go if you can find somebody great. And otherwise, of course, there's management companies, but you really don't need that.
It's amazing how the internet can be a gift and a curse for us at so many times. Do you think MTRs can scale as easily or not compared to short-term rentals? Do you think there's a scalability that's, easier for a new investor maybe to digest, or what are your kind of thoughts there?
I think in multifamily, you can really scale. So I see people with buildings that they have kind of transitioned a few from long-term rentals. So maybe they are renovating a unit and they decide, hey, let's just test this one. And then you see that it's doing really good. And as people start moving out, you just add furniture to all those units or update them a little bit. So that can work really well, especially if you're doing partial long-term, partial midterm. So with a multifamily building, you just don't have vacancy all at the same time. That can be great. I think the trick though with midterm is that after we wrote the book, a lot of people started doing it, right? And so there are certain markets that feel a little more saturated than others, and you really kind of have to do a little bit of market research before you go into it.
Let's lead into that a little bit then too, because that's perfect. Like, what do you look for when you're looking at a market? Like, I'm kind of curious because I know you mentioned Furnish Finder and Airbnb, but is there anything like that draws your attention to a new market when you're kind of looking around besides some of those like early, looks into the OTAs that are out there?
Yeah. So one thing that's cool that Furnish Finder is starting to roll out is more and more data. And so they have like the top emerging markets, the top, performers, the ones that are doing the best and are doing the worst. Like, there is information there that can help you choose a market. So I think that's just a great place to dig in more. The other thing that's just going to be the most valuable is talking to people. So even if you don't live in that market, Facebook groups are really where a lot of investors hang out, and you can get so much information. I find that most investors and wholesalers, they're really helpful. I think that's really the best thing, is to talk to someone who's actually doing it. Don't go on Furnish Finder or Airbnb and reach out to all the hosts, because they're going to think that you want a book and then they're going to be annoyed with you. So that's not the way to go. And then things like Bigger Pockets, BPCon is coming up. So go to these kinds of events, because you're going to meet more and more people that are doing what you want to do. And maybe there's partnerships that are possible.
Yep. And we will get a full presentation from you at BPCon, talking with others about the midterm rental space. And, we're definitely highlighting the 30-day stay book. What is one big lesson that you would want people to take away from after they read 30-day stay, or if they're considering purchasing it and kind of, checking out this path down the line? What's one big lesson that you think they could take away from it?
Yeah, I think what's really cool about the way we wrote that book is we had this intention of making it an A to Z, that you could pick this book up, never invested in real estate, and by the end of it, have enough tools to go out and find a property. So we really go into how to find a property, markets, figuring out like if the numbers are going to work for you, how to furnish the property, how to market for tenants, like all of it. It's all there. So yeah, I think it's a great place to start. I mean, $20 for a book, and it's like a whole, it's the university, right?
You can spend $20 on a lot worse things. I think it's a good investment for anybody that's considering this route. I think one of the last questions I kind of want to tackle, and I think that a lot of people that may have made it this far into the video and are kind of exploring this route, is they might be a little burnt out on the daily short-term rental grind of the management and just 24/7. What's the first step you would tell them besides checking out 30-day stays? What's the next step after that that you would think would be a good thing for them to start exploring this market even more?
It could be two different directions. It's either maybe go to a local RIA, like some kind of meetup group, and talk to other people that are doing it, so you can get a feel for, how it truly is. I always think that, a lot of things sound shiny on, Instagram or whatever. It's like, oh, my great life with my 20 units. And actually it's like really hard and you're in the weeds. So talk to someone who's going to tell you the real story. And the other thing is run numbers. Start looking online for deals and see if you can find numbers that are working for you. One thing that I got into last couple years is creative financing, because I was finding that now with today's high interest rates, it's like not necessarily making sense to buy a midterm or even sometimes short-term rentals. And so if you can find a way to get lower interest rates through being creative, through doing seller financing, that can help a lot more. So I don't know what market you guys are in, but I sell nationwide. So if you want to reach out to me, I'm happy to help with that too.
Awesome. Where could they reach out to you if they did want to chat any further about this kind of topic?
My website's zionnamcintyre.com, or on Instagram. That's the most popular one for me, at Zionna McIntyre.
Awesome. And we'll leave all that in the show description as well. And we really appreciate you coming on to highlight, another form of cash flow that can come from rentals, but then also you get the benefit of a little less stress from the short-term rental side too. So it's something I've kind of kicked the tire on and been exploring. And then now hearing even more feedback from you after I finish out 30-day stays, I might get a couple of midterm rentals this next year to kind of balance out my portfolio as well too. So I might be reaching out to you in your DMs with a couple of questions.
Do it. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on, and we will see you at BPCon this year. And we will leave a link in the description for everything she mentioned today to purchase the book as well. And if you made it this far in the video, please hit subscribe, leave a comment below. Let us know if you want her to come back on and answer any burning questions you may have now. And until then, we'll see y'all in the next episode. Take care.